listening to the Terrific Teacherpreneur, a podcast for teachers looking to grow a successful online business. Your host, Alex, was able to transform her Teachers Pay Teachers store from a small side hustle into a profitable full-time business. She now helps other teachers do the same. Listen along for actionable tips and helpful wisdom about business and marketing as a teacherpreneur. Here's your host, Alex.
Hello and welcome to the Terrific Teacherpreneur podcast. I'm thinking that this is going to be a fairly short episode. I have a little bit of a time limit in how long I can record for. My daughter Lily is at the park with my in-laws, and so who knows when they'll be back. This won't be super long. And it's also going to be a bit of a hot mess of an episode. Fair warning, this is not one topic that I chose I'm going to be talking about. I was looking through my notes app of a bunch of ideas I have. Like when I get a random podcast idea, I'll write it down and there's just like a bunch of random ideas all in there. I was having a look at them and none of them were really like something I would do a whole episode about. They're just like all these random tidbits of advice. And I just thought, you know what? I think I might just record an episode with all of them. So I'm just going to share like random words of wisdom with you, random bits of advice that have obviously just like randomly come to me over the years, I guess. Let's get started. Let's hear some of this advice. First up, I've written down, and this is, I kid you not, it just literally says violin in subway. You're probably thinking like, what? I was reading a book, and actually this is something I think I've seen on social media too, but there is this anecdote that goes around, and it's about a guy called Joshua Bell. I'm not sure if you've heard of him or not, but he's a really famous and talented violinist. And he obviously performs in these, giant auditoriums and theaters for thousands of people, and they pay huge amounts of money to, hear him play because he's very talented. And he did an experiment, and this was well over a decade ago, like in 2007 or something like that. He went into a subway, I think it was in like Washington, D.C., and he played all of these masterful pieces over like an hour. And they recorded and like did it as an experiment. How many people stopped and listened? How many people paid him? That kind of thing. I think he only made like $30 in tips or something. And only I think it was less than 10 people actually stopped to listen to him play, which is crazy. And the whole, I think, thing that you can learn from that was that sometimes it's about the environment you're in. When you put this really talented, amazing violinist in an environment that makes him look like he's this really talented violinist, everybody wants to dress up nice and pay him lots of money and think that he's amazing and be wowed by him. And when you put him in an environment that's just like busy people on their commute to work, like in rush hour, just like average Joes, and they just think he's just some busker, he was treated like almost like a complete nobody. And nobody had any sort of wow or respect for him. But yet he was playing at the exact same level in terms of talent. It's a really fascinating experiment. It really does show like the environment you're in and the impact it has. And I'm sure there's like way more nuances to it. But it was in a book I read, and I think I remember thinking, this is a lot like your resources on Teachers Pay Teachers. You could have this amazing resource that is really engaging, great for students, time-saving, like really high quality, and you know that teachers would love it. And if you put it in a store with a listing that's like a terrible thumbnails, terrible cover, no preview, bad description, no SEO optimization, and it's sort of festering at the bottom of search, that's a little bit like him playing in the subway. And then if it's got this amazing listing, it's SEO optimized, beautiful cover and thumbnail images, a really powerful, persuasive preview description, the whole works. It's kind of like when he's playing violin in these amazing auditoriums, and it's like the environment you're putting it in. So I think a little takeaway for you is that you can create the most amazing, high quality resource. And I like to believe that, the cream rises to the top and it will speak for itself and great resources will sell themselves. But there is a limit to that because it will fester on page 20 of search. It will be like it's in the subway instead of that amazing auditorium. If you aren't optimizing your listings, I think it's like a really good lesson to tell yourself, like, it's not all about the quality of your product. You could make a great product, but if we do an experiment and we give it a terrible listing, it won't sell. And if we optimize a listing and make it amazing, you have potential to, have it be like this guy playing violin in these fancy places, like doing amazingly, and have people's perception of it change and have your sales and success change. I'm a really big, passionate fan of optimizing your listings. It's something like I'm really, really into, especially at the moment. But I think if your sales aren't where you want them to be, churning out another product, joining another marketing platform is probably not going to make a massive difference to you right now. I guess I'm talking to you, not if you're like a newer seller, because you should be creating products. And if you're a really veteran, you're probably making a lot of money anyway. You just want to keep marketing, that's fine. you might be like doing your email list or whatever, that's fine. But if you're like in the middle and you're kind of listening to this, you're one of those people that has like 100 resources in your store, you feel like you've done all the product creation side of things. Like, why am I not making the money I'm supposed to be making? Why is all my resources, like, why are they all sitting there like the whole Subway thing? Like, they're not getting seen, they're not getting appreciated. Is it because they're not optimized? That's the truth of it. I'm actually working on something right now for seasoned sellers. Like, as when this episode comes out, I'm hoping it will really be nearly ready to be released. But I'm going to be really focusing on that, like putting a pause on the creating new products and stuff. Like, let's work together to get your listings up to scratch. It's what I do with coaching students, but I want to do it on a bigger scale with a lot more sellers. Like, I want to increase people's sales by focusing on the right stuff. So I'm really excited about that, but I won't talk too much about that. It's kind of a little secret project in the works. But yeah, that was a really interesting thing for me. It was in my notes app, and I just remember reading that thinking, oh my goodness, yes, that's like TpT listings that just aren't being appreciated. The next thing I have on my notes app is a little reality check. It literally says harsh truths for sellers. And it was like something that kind of occurred to me that I thought might be reassuring to sort of smaller or newer sellers, or people that aren't, considering themselves like these big experienced veteran sellers making millions of dollars or whatever. And a little bit of a reality about, why you might be at the point you're at and why they might be at a different point, and just things to keep in mind. And I've written down that something to keep in mind. One is a lot of these really bigger sellers you see that you might be comparing yourself to often have a very different situation behind the scenes. And this is, like a harsh reality is you might be a solopreneur and they might have a huge team, or even if they don't have a huge team, they have like 1 or 2 full-time employees, whatever. It's a whole different ballgame when you've got all these people supporting you. So, they're not like better than you and more skilled than you, and like you don't need to feel bad about yourself. Like, they've got help that you don't have, and that's very, very different. That's like a privilege that they have. Another privilege I wrote down is time is a privilege. And I think now that I've had a baby, or a toddler now that I have a child, I can understand a little bit about how when before I had Lily, I had that whole privilege of I was full-time TpT, and I kind of had endless opportunities to do what I wanted, how much I wanted work-wise. It's a privilege to have the time sometimes. And a lot of the time, if you're a full-time teacher or you have children or just a busy life in general, you might be caring like for sick relatives, you might have like pets and responsibilities and like, community things you do. And at the end of the day, you just don't have the same amount of time as someone else. It's a privilege to have, huge amounts of time, and you might not have that. And so again, you're comparing yourself to someone who's in a very, very different situation to you. So you can't be beating yourself up when you just don't have the same time that they have. That's not fair. And the other thing I wrote was like, sometimes people do actually have certain skills. And so like, this is a hard truth, but maybe you're just bad at something. Like, maybe you're bad at graphic design and you just don't have an eye for making things look pretty. And someone else just has like a natural flair for it. And I've seen that a little bit with people I've worked with. Some people, when it comes to making covers, they just have like this skill and they just make these beautiful, gorgeous covers. And I'm like, wow, I don't need to give you any feedback on that. It looks beautiful. And then other people will really, really struggle to make anything that looks kind of appealing to the eye. And I think sometimes there is just like a little bit of skill there with graphic design. And if you don't have that skill and someone else does, like maybe you need to learn or practice, but maybe you need to hire someone to do some branded templates for you. Like, hire someone that's like a branding person, or maybe buy some templates on TpT for like covers or previews or something. I actually do have in my TpT store a preview template. I will link that in the show notes if you're looking for that, because it's like editable and you can just like brand it to your stuff, but it's all kind of set up for you. But yeah, if, sometimes we actually just don't have a flair for things. And I think it's important to admit that, that could be really holding you back, and you might need to actually invest in a way to make your store look more appealing and eye-catching. So yeah, those are a couple of little harsh truths I think that just, and I hope they kind of reassure you sometimes. It's like, you feel bad about yourself. You're like, why am I not at the point that other sellers are at, comparing myself to them and feeling really bad about myself? But, remembering that there's these privileges that they might have, and whether that's time or money to invest or, a team or whatever, you can't compare yourself to them. You just can't, because it's so different. So try to, I know it's really hard, but try to not look at what other people are doing, because you don't know the full situation. And it makes you feel bad about yourself, which is obviously unfair. The next thing I've written down is, I wrote this: sometimes success stories are more harmful than helpful. And I think this is like when you see something in a Facebook group or something on social media or whatever, and or maybe like like TpT conference or something, like you hear someone's story and they are talking about the amazing success they've achieved, like really large amounts of money they're earning, amazing things they've done, all these goals they've achieved. And it can sometimes give a little bit of an unrealistic expectation of the earnings that you're capable of, the growth that you can have, the success that you can have. And you think, oh, well, just because they're a millionaire, that means totally I can do it. But like I said before, you might be in a situation that genuinely doesn't allow that. Like you could be a single parent and you could be working like 2 jobs. You could be, you know what I mean? And that's very different to someone that has endless amounts of time to do things. I think it's important to acknowledge that some people have that privilege of time. And so then you start going, well, why can't I reach these amazing goals? Why can't I be earning that kind of money? And then this is when you spiral into the I'm not good enough. I'm not talented enough. They're better than me. I should just give up. I should just quit. And it's actually sometimes unfair that they've told you this kind of amazing success they have. And it's actually just genuinely not something that's in your grasp right now because of your situation. And I don't think that we should be feeling bad about ourselves when it comes to that. I think, yeah, I've had my eyes open to that since I've basically not had as much time to work on my business. Like I said, I've got this like little 15-minute window. And then at some point I'm going to look out the window, the literal window, and see my daughter toddling along the road. And like, we're going to have to stop this episode. Like that's reality now. I don't have the same amount of time. And it's opened my eyes a lot to that privilege I had before. So I think it's important to acknowledge sometimes success stories can be very, very motivating. And I don't have any problem with them. They're amazing. I sometimes share successes I've had. But take it with a grain of salt and remember that sometimes people have, other opportunities and privileges you don't have, and don't let a success story ever make you feel bad about yourself. If it's going to motivate you, great. Listen to those things, like really take that on board, let it inspire you. If it's going to make you even feel a tiny bit bad about yourself, remember what I've said, that there's, everyone's got a very, very different situation. My next little random note, I've written Atomic Habits. So this is obviously a little note from when I was rereading the book a couple of weeks ago. I wrote, like the seller you want to be. And basically he talks about the people who have these like habits and they do these things, better than others. So you're like, oh, how come this person's able to get up and go to the gym every day before work? Like, what? I could never do that. And he talks about how a lot of the time you actually have an identity that you have created for yourself. Like, oh, I'm a fit, healthy person. And so going to the gym is actually effortless because it's just something that just sort of fits in with this personality and like identity you've created for yourself, and the habits become like this effortless thing. So when you look at someone and they're really glamorous, you're like, oh my goodness, how do they have the time? Like, how do they, get up in the morning, do all this makeup and hair and like, ugh. And you're like, well, actually, it's really easy for them because they've got this identity for themselves. They consider themselves really, like high maintenance or glamorous, or they look after themselves. It's a big part of who they are. And so doing all that stuff is an effortless, easy thing for them because it just ties into the identity that they've already created for themselves. And so I thought, okay, well, that kind of is interesting. It's a little bit about mindset. If you are playing small and thinking of yourself as this newer, smaller seller or this person not earning a lot, you will always continue to act that way. So if you want to create these amazing habits of, success, you need to act like the seller you want to be. And so that's like almost pretending that you are a CEO, pretending you're this seller of this big company or this big team or this like really successful seller. Because once you start changing the identity and how you view yourself, then you can start changing your habits and you'll say, okay, well, what would that kind of person do? Would they be working on this task or would they do that? It's especially good if you're a medium sort of seller and you're like, you haven't hired anyone yet, but you can actually afford it, but you've just been like talking yourself out of it. You go, well, I'm going to start viewing myself as a CEO, as this really big, successful seller. And how would they act? What would they do? Oh, they would 100% hire a Pinterest manager because I know I'm not good at Pinterest. I'm just going to hire it. Like that's what they would tell themselves. They would just start making those habits and changes based on the identity they've created. And so that's really good because I think, yeah, sometimes we view ourselves, we put ourselves in a certain box and then we are very limited in what we can achieve because we're not doing the things that a successful person would do. So look at your business and think, what would they be doing if they were this big successful seller? Like how would they be doing things? There's someone I've always looked up to that earns a lot on TpT. And like when I see like a comment from them in a Facebook group and it's like something they've done, I'm like, they really know what they're talking about. Like they make all these like really big, scary choices. They do all these like really serious things. They like really act like this big shot. And it's like not surprising that they are where they are because they act that way. And I'm like, well, how can I be doing more things like that? I definitely want to listen to them because I want to be where they are. So yeah, you look up to people and think, how can I like be a CEO? What does that mean I should be working on? What should I be doing? And, look at things that way. I think it's really helpful. Okay, here's another one. It's a good quote. I think it's going to be my last one because I think I'm pushing it here if I try to do any much of a longer episode. The last one I've got is literally, this is what it says. It just says, if it's easy for you to make, it's easy for them to resist. If it's hard for you to make, it's hard for them to resist. And I think basically what I'm referring to there is the product creation side of things. If you make one of those really quick, easy resources, where you do it in like an afternoon or a day or two, and it's like from a template, and it's like 10 pages, and it's like this little set of worksheets or something. It's like really easy for you to make. It's easy for buyers to resist purchasing because they could technically just like make it themselves, or they think, I can live without that thing. It's just like this bonus sort of thing maybe I want, but I don't really need. If it's hard for you to make, so something that's like some big, unit of work, and it's got these lesson plans and it takes you like weeks or months to create, it's like, or a big bundle or a big product that's really expensive, like something that's really time consuming. If it's really hard for you to make, maybe it's like difficult or monotonous or something like that. It's hard for them to resist as a buyer because they think, oh my goodness, in a million years, I could never, ever make that myself. I don't have the time or skill or whatever. And this actually applies to other sellers too, because if it's easy for you to make, well, it's easy for other sellers to also make. And the harder stuff, the more, intensive stuff, a lot of other sellers don't have the time or the energy or the interest in doing. So you can kind of separate yourself from the pack and create these amazing resources that are a lot more irresistible to buyers, but also less competitive, because every seller under the sun is capable of making, like 5 pages of phonics worksheets, probably just, but not every seller is going to make, some big year-long curriculum for phonics. So do you know what I'm saying? So it's a really good quote to remember when you're thinking about what product should I make next. Maybe if you're thinking about the really sort of labor-intensive stuff that will be more irresistible to buyers and will not be as, commonly done by other sellers. Okay, so that's the things I wanted to share. I don't know how you felt about this episode. It was probably a bit like random and rambly. You can always let me know, like message me on Instagram or like let me know in the Facebook group or something, how you felt about it. If you actually found it helpful, if you liked it, I actually probably do have a bunch of other things on that little notes app that I could share if you don't mind some words of wisdom. It's always helpful to get feedback on how I do things, and you can be brutally honest too. You can say, Alex, like, oh my goodness, you just rambled on. Like, come on. Also, I don't mind feedback if you want to tell me like things you want to hear. What kind of topics do you want to hear more of? What do you want to learn from me? That's always helpful to me because I have a million things I could talk about on this podcast, but I want to talk about things that actually interest and help you. So definitely let me know. I'll put the links in the show notes, but the Facebook group, Terrific Teacherpreneur, or my Instagram at Terrific Selling Tactics, that kind of thing. You can always let me know. But anyway, I really hope that this episode has helped you think about a few things. I'm going to wrap this up before I run out of time. But yeah, I'll put a few links in the show notes. One of them being the waitlist for that seasoned sellers program I mentioned, if you're interested. It's going to be really, really good. I'm really excited. And then, also like the Facebook group, the Instagram and stuff. And I think there was something else I was going to put a link for. I cannot remember, but yeah, check the links in the show notes for all the things I've mentioned, and I hope that you have a terrific day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Terrific Teacherpreneur. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Come back for more actionable tips and helpful wisdom in the next episode with your host, Alex. Until then.